let me introduce myself. My name is Marvin. I'm Marvin Yu, one of the course advisors here at EIT. And then I'll be hosting this webinar. Together with me is Dr. Peter Doe. He is one of our EIT board member here. Okay, and then yep. Before we actually start, we would like to request everyone if we'll be doing our mic and camera check, of course, the screen. If you can actually send us a thumbs up on the chat box, if you can actually see and hear us, and of course the slides, that we would really appreciate that one. Thank you so much. So we have people coming in, right? Hmm. Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your thumbs up. Yeah, I can start. I start to see thumbs up coming in from the chat box. Thank you so much. Okay, and yep, so before we actually proceed with the presentation, just a few reminders of regarding the notification and sounds. So we just want to request if you can actually turn that off from your end, your phone from this one, for you to have a laser focused attention on the discussion today. We would like to request to turn it off, okay? And then at the same time, if you do have any questions for Dr. Peter or any academic questions or any question at all, please feel free to post that up on the Q&A section on top of your screens. Okay, so yep, thank you so much. And for common questions, for those who have registered, you'll be able to receive a copy of your slides and, of course, a copy of the link to the video recording after 2 business days. So please monitor your junk mails as it usually goes straight there, so you might miss it out. Okay, and since this is a technical webinar, those who will be attending until tuning in until the end of our presentation, we will be providing a free digital certificate of attendance. Okay, and then after the presentation, we'll be providing the instructions or the link to the short form survey so that you'll be able to get your certificate afterwards. Okay, and you'll be able to receive that one in the next 4 business days. Okay. For those who just attended or first timers attending here at our live webinar, just an info about EIT. So we are an education provider based in Perth, Western Australia. We also have a campus in Melbourne, Victoria, and we just recently opened our campus in Brisbane, which is good. And then we specialized in engineering courses. Okay, so we offer wide range of programs, engineering programs, starting from our professional certificate course. We also have our diploma and advanced diploma courses, undergraduate certificates, bachelor's, graduate certificates, and graduate diplomas. We also have our masters, of course, masters of engineering, and then doctor of engineering. Okay, so these programs are actually designed by industry experts to make sure that our students have, the cutting edge skills that they need, and of course, valuable to our employers. Okay, and then of course, we are proud that our programs, okay, some of our vocational and higher education programs are accredited by the Australian government and as well as engineering bodies such as Sydney, Dublin, and of course, Washington Accord. Okay, and of course, we're proud to say that our programs are being delivered by, of course, industry experienced lecturers. They're not just teaching, they're also in the field. They're working on the field. So basically what they are doing is shared to our students. So again, they can get the cutting edge skills that they need and of course valued by employers. Okay, and one thing nice, we also have a unique delivery model. So we're actually using that one, like this one, live webinars, okay, for our students outside Australia. And of course, we have a dedicated learning support officer, and we make use. This is something that we are proud of. We make use of state-of-the-art technologies such as hands-on workshops, remote laboratories, and simulation software. So if you can actually visit on website and see how it actually works in the state-of-the-art hands-on workshop, you'll be amazed by that. Okay, so yep. Without further ado. Let's talk about the topic today. So that's engineering, a safe voyage and overcoming mechanical failures, and navigational challenges across Bass Strait. Okay, so this is a technical webinar, again, which will be presented by Dr. Peter Doe. He's EIT Academic Board member here, of course. And then, yep. Dr. Peter, I will allow you to introduce yourself more. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Marvin. I'd also like to thank Steve McKay and the EIT team for allowing me the opportunity of presenting this webinar. I hope you find it interesting. It's a cautionary tale for those of you who may be interested in buying a boat. But it's also what I would say a triumph of perseverance and perseverance against adversity. In the words of Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until it's done. Okay, so my background is I'm a Tasmanian from the island of Tasmania, which is that fairly large island south of the mainland of Australia. People get it confused with Tanzania, but it's not. It's typically it's 300 kilometres. It's a triangle, 300 kilometres by 300 kilometres. So that gives you an idea. I grew up there, and I've always been interested in sailing. Hobart is a maritime port. It's got some of the most enjoyable sailing waters in the world, safe sailing waters. So let me just now go to my first slide. Let's just see what happens here. We go back here. I think I probably need to, let me just see. That's Marvin. So next one should be that one.
Yep.
Oh, we
Good
don't
photo
need
of you,
that.
Dr. Peter.
Yes, okay. So we don't need that. That's just an introduction. That'll be there. So, all right, can you see that it says I've owned and built yachts? Can you see that, Marvin? Can you see
Yep.
check that
I can
I'm
see that one.
Yeah,
you
I
can
can
see
see
that
that
one.
one,
Okay.
Dr. Yep,
I've,
yep.
I've owned and built yachts. Okay, so on the left-hand side is the first yacht I had. It was a little sailor, rainbow sailing craft. When I finished my university and I married, my wife Cherry and I bought this little, in the middle, this little 25-foot hardwood cruising yacht called the Kiwi. It was rather nice. We did a lot of sailing around. It had a Clay, CLAE, single-cylinder petrol engine. That was the auxiliary. And you started this by manually turning the flywheel. And if it didn't start, then there were some problems. So when I sort of, when my kids came along in 1997, when my son Christopher was 9 and my daughter Alyssa was 7, I built this yacht you can see on the right-hand side. She was When I say I built it, I bought the fiberglass shell and fitted it out, all the rigging and all the internal fittings, put a 2-cylinder Volvo sail drive motor in it, which actually started electrically, and that was a plus. And my children grew up on that boat, and we sailed it around the waters of Hobart, thinking at some stage I might enter it in the Sydney Hobart race, yacht race. Now, I'll talk a bit more about that later, but we never got around to that. And in 1996, I think it was, when I was transferred to head up the engineering school at Launceston, which is on the River Tamar, and there's not a lot of sailing can be done on this river. So we sold Rigel, and then that was that. So there was a break of sort of 20 or 30 years when I didn't do any sailing. I didn't have a boat. Unfortunately, my wife Cherry died shortly after I retired from university as associate professor. But after that, I took on a job as head of engineering school in Kuwait, and I met a lovely lady there, and we married. And 3 years ago, I lost her. So at that time, something told me that I should really start thinking about sailing again. I was interested in um, some rather big boats and looked at anyhow. So that's the story. That's my very brief story about how I came to um, get in a position where I now have a boat. And so we will get to the next slide. And I click on that. Okay. So I had to make a big decision. I was by myself. Um, the decision I made was to sell the family home where I had it for 56 years. My children grew up there. The house was too big. The block was too steep. The garden was in a bit of a mess, and the house was showing its age, like me. Um, so that was the decision to buy a smaller house. It finished up buying the smaller house in a place called Dover, which is 73 kilometres away from Hobart, but that's another story. And this boat. And the whole idea was that um, the boat would be moored in, in the marina in the city of Hobart. So I could use that as a place to stay in when I had to overnight in Hobart. So that was the plan. Um, so now, what sort of boat? Um, as I said, I'd been looking at large boats. I wanted something bigger than Rigel. I wanted something about 40 feet. Um, and a 40-foot yacht with sails is a little bit big to handle with one person. So I found this boat. It was a Mariner Flybridge cruiser. You probably can't read the description there, but what appealed to me was that it had very high bulwarks around. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but anyhow, the rails were high, so it was a safe boat. I could walk around the cabin. Um, by myself, it's not a good idea to be sailing in a boat if you have not got a lot of built-in safety by yourself, I mean. So this boat appealed to me. It had two engines, two um, six-cylinder, what they call Ford Lehman engines, which is a Ford truck engine with a marine conversion. We'll talk a bit more about that later. Um, so the next step was to inspect the boat. Um, I had a look at it. I thought it looked all right, what I wanted. Um, I put a deposit on it. I did a trial run. We made it up and down the river where it was. I'll say a bit more about that. Um, it had to be hauled out. That's part of the process. I had to have a professional survey done in order to get insurance. And then I actually purchased the boat on the 23rd of January. Excuse me, that's my phone. Sorry about that. You were told to mute your phones. I didn't. I will do so now.
Okay.
Okay. Um, all right. By the way, the boat was called the John B2. Well, the boat is called the John B2. And I'll play you this little bit of music. For those of you who don't know, there's a song. Here it goes. Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, but the music was not. Yeah.
Okay, well, don't worry about the music. It's just that there was a song called the John B, and the boat was
Oh,
named after John B. Okay, so
okay.
all right. So this is the boat. Um, so it was hauled out up on a slip, cleaned, anti-fouled, and I did all I could to make sure it was fit for the voyage home. Now, I'll explain a bit more. I'll just jump here. The boat was located at a place called Batemans Bay, and that's halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, or near Canberra on the coast. Um, and so the challenge is to get that boat from Batemans Bay down to Hobart. Um, and I'll explain that a little bit further. Oh, here we go. Um, The original plan was, there's Bateman's Bay. Can you see my cursor?
Yes, we can see that.
Oh, that's good. Um, to sail down the south coast of New South Wales and then straight across this body of water called Bass Strait. Um, and that's this stretch of water. It's about 100 nautical miles wide here. Um, and it's it's a notorious stretch of water. Notorious because it's dangerous. Um, it's shallow. It's only about 100 meters deep, and the winds come from the west, and the storms can be quite deadly. In fact, in 1978, I think it was, there was a yacht race from Sydney to Hobart. Every year they have the Sydney Hobart yacht race, and 6 sailors died in that race, and only 115 yachts started, and only I think 34 or 44 actually got to Hobart. The rest were damaged or sunk, or it was anyhow. It's a dangerous stretch of water. So I did all I could to prepare the boat for this trip. Um, One thing I knew I had to do was to get the fuel tanks cleaned. So I employed somebody to empty the tanks. There were 2 of them, and what they found is a lot of muck um, in the bottom of the tank. And this is typical of diesel boats, diesel engines, that um, there's a reaction, but at the surface between the fuel and the water, which always for condensation finishes up in the bottom of the tank. And this was called diesel bug. This um, bacteria grows and causes this muck, and that was a problem, or that is a problem. And I thought I'd had the fuel tanks cleaned, but you'll hear a bit more about that in a few minutes. Um, so um, I did what I could to get the boat prepared, and I hired a professional crew, and these are people who their job is to deliver boats. And it's interesting, when you hire a professional crew, you have the skipper and the deckhand and the owner, and that's the order of command: the skipper, then the deckhand, and the owner has very little say in what happens after that. Um, so we set off from Batemans Bay. The plan was to go to Eden, to that's quite a big port. Big cruise ships come in there, and stay there until we got a weather window. And by that I mean, and this is some software called Windy, and you can get that. It's windy.com. It's free at a certain level. You can get a professional version, but anyhow, and that will show you the wind and how it develops and what it's going to do, forecast for the next week. So on the left-hand side, this is what we had planned: to go from uh, wait at Eden until the weather improved, and then go straight down to Hobart. And that would have taken about 48 hours, I think, from memory. I'll come back to the actual later. Um, so we set off for Eden. We got to Eden after 13 hours at sea. Entered Eden Harbour at night, and we anchored in a very nice little bay at the south end of Eden Harbour, and everything was fine except that the skipper, he didn't like the look of the oil in the starboard engine, the starboard engine on the right-hand side of the boat. As I said, there are two engines, they're similar, they're both 120 horsepower diesels, but the oil looked a bit milky, and that was a worry. And we were losing coolant. We kept on checking the level of the coolant, and the coolant was disappearing, which is a bit of a problem. So what happened at Eden was that when we sort of motored across to the other side of the bay, the port, to get some parts that we needed, and anyhow, what happened suddenly is that the temperature in that engine increased above 180 degrees to nearly boiling point of the coolant, and a lot of steam started blowing out the exhaust. So, sorry, is there a sound issue? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear, okay, right. And we knew we had a problem. So the skipper decided we can't continue on. We will go back to Batemans Bay because there wasn't any really good place to keep a boat in Eden. So we limped back up the coast at reduced speed on the engine, on the starboard engine, pouring coolant water in all the time. We got as far as a place called Bermagui, which is shown on this map. It's about halfway between where we started and Eden, and that we put in there just because it was getting dark. So we got there, and the following morning, when we tried to start the engine, it just went thunk. That's the sound it made. We tried to start it, went thunk. It's a terrible noise. And the skipper said we have a hydro lock, he called it, and what that meant was that there was coolant in the engine. Marvin, are you talking to me?
No, I'm actually responding to the inquiry
Oh,
in the
right.
chat.
That's
Yeah.
okay. Fine.
All good, all good.
I thought we had a problem. Okay, I'm still
No,
here.
no.
So anyhow, the following morning, the engine wouldn't start, and so we knew there was a problem. And so what happened after that? I'd say it's terminally ill. We discovered that. So the skipper went and took the mechanic from Bermagui took the head off the engine. Now you can see the engine there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cylinders. We suspected it would be a head gasket problem. That's quite common in engines. That the gasket between the cylinder head, the block, and the cover, what holds the valves and so on. If that fails, then you get coolant coming into the cylinders, and that's what caused the hydro lock. But there didn't seem to be anything wrong with the head gasket. And when the mechanic turned the engine by hand so that number 6 piston was at bottom dead center, right down the bottom, while we looked at it, to our absolute horror, coolant started flowing up past the piston. Now, that should not have happened. And it only happened because there was either a pinhole in the liner of the cylinder or a crack in the engine block. What it was, there was no way it could be fixed. So we had to remove the engine. We had to take out an engine. which weighed 750 kilograms, by lifting it up out of the bottom of the boat with a strong bar at the top and these frames, and lifting it up, putting boards under it, moving it 30 centimetres, putting it down, moving the frames. It took us all day to get the engine out. And there it was. There we go. That was what the engine looked like with the crane out the back of the boat. We're at Bermagui. I said it's a nice place to be stranded, but I didn't want to be stranded. I wanted to get that boat back home. But at that time, when we discovered that the engine was permanently ill, there was a fault in the block. I didn't really know. I didn't have a plan B. And it was only because that one of my friends saw an advertisement in one of the local magazines who was trying to sell a similar engine, that I found this fellow he's called Mick, from a place called Cowra in the middle of New South Wales. And what he did, his job, his hobby, his job really, was going around and finding bits of these engines in old boats and repairing them. So 6 weeks later, a new engine arrived. It was bits of my old engine, but new bits, and obviously a new block, but all put together and nice and painted red, and we reversed the process and we lowered that back down into the bottom of the boat, and so we were good to go again. Of course, the engine had to be running, and it was a new engine, new pistons, new cylinders, and so on. So it had to be running, and so the first 9 hours, I ran it in according to the instructions. You have 1 hour at 1,000 revs, or this sort of thing. And the last 6 hours had to be. I thought, okay, let's do this. Let's go back to Batemans Bay. So I got up in the middle of the night and drove the boat back to Batemans Bay by myself, so I could get into the harbour before a front came through. So that's what it was like, with the engines running beautifully, and halfway through the voyage, the sun came up over the Tasman Sea, and I got this lovely photograph. And so we were in a position at that stage with a new engine, a new crew. I got another new crew to come. We had a good weather window. We departed Batemans Bay on the 6th of May. Remember, I bought the boat at the end of January, and on the 6th of May, we were ready to go again. We had smooth motoring. We bypassed Eden, where we got to before. We went into Bass Strait, this dangerous stretch of water, and we got about 20 nautical miles into Bass Strait, and then, say, disaster. I was down below having a sleep. What we do on these long voyages, we have what we call watches, 3-hour watches. I'll be on watch for 3 hours running the boat, the skipper for 3 hours, the deckhand for 3 hours. So that's how we organise it. So the engine just started going slower and slower, and then stopped. Right in the middle of the Bass, not in the middle of Bass Strait, but into the Bass Strait in fairly rough, tumbly water, and we had to work out what the problem was. The problem was that there was dirty fuel. And you remember, I tried to, I got the fuel tanks cleaned when I bought the boat, but the fuel tanks on this boat were 2.5 meters long. They each held 1,500 litres of fuel, which is a lot of fuel. There were 2 of them. Then they had baffles every sort of 200 centimetres along this the length of the fuel tanks, and it was impossible to to get them cleaned because there was only one opening at the top of the tank down the aft end. So what would happen was that because the boat had spent most of its life in fairly sheltered waters, this fuel had accumulated in the tanks, in between the baffles, and the shaking up as we went down the coast, you saw rolling back and forward, had shaken up the fuel. The filters couldn't cope with it. That was the primary filter. There are 3 filters that got past the secondary filters and into the engine and stopped the engine. So what do you do? Clearly, we had extra filters, so we put extra. The crew fitted these filters. Quite difficult to fit them actually, because you had to crawl around through a confined space. Fitted the filters, and we got the engines going again. But they stopped after half an hour. So a decision was made, correct decision, not to continue, but to turn back. So after 34 hours at sea, we finished up back at Bermagui. So that was rather disappointing, to say the least. But even worse, that because the contaminant, the muck, had got into the engines, the starboard engine, the new engine, was blowing a lot of smoke and was clearly very sick. So we had 2 problems. We had another sick engine, and we wanted to know what to do about the dirty fuel. So these were the options. We could cut a hole in the tank and cut holes in the tank, but these tanks were quite long and they extended under the furniture. So it was decided that we couldn't do that without pulling the boat apart. What we could also do is polish the fuel, and we did that. My son and I he came up and helped me, and we made this little device, which is a filter and a pump, and we just pumped fuel out of the bottom of the tank, put it through the filter and back in the top of the tank. That's called polishing. And we also were able to put a hose in between the baffles. This is inside the tank, and these are what called limber holes. And we pushed a hose through at least to get behind the first baffle and sucked fuel out of there and tried to clean that. So we did what we could. All right, so next. And we had to have the engines repaired. My friend Mick came down from Cowra and put in new injectors, and we got the engines all going again nicely. So on the 27th of June, pretty much as a sea trial, a fellow yachty and I, who I met in Bermagui, we decided we'd motor down from Bermagui to Lake's Entrance, and that was it was about 100 nautical miles, and it took us 24 hours. And it was a very, very pleasant trip. We had dolphins. That's brothers, because you can see the dolphins. These dolphins, they come along and there's a pressure wave in front of the bow, and they surf it. And they're having a lovely time. And we enjoyed them, their company. So we got into back one. We got into Lake's Entrance, which is halfway along the Victorian coast, and that was coming in to Lake's Entrance. But then we had a look at the primary filters, and after 24 hours, clearly we hadn't done enough to get rid of the muck in the tank. So another big problem. We couldn't go further without solving the fuel problem. And the solution was not cheap, but it comprised these filter sets, and I had 4 of them, 2 for each engine. And what they did, they actually spin the fuel and it runs through a micron filter. But the real beauty of these is that there are two handles here, these these handles, and you can switch from one to the other without stopping the engines. So that was the solution. So I fitted these filters and we set out again. So we waited for a weather window looking at, this is windy. I won't play that video, but it gives you an idea. You can look, as I said, you can look ahead about 7 days. So we headed out across the bar with my new crew. Now, just to explain, on the east coast of Australia, there are a lot of these ports associated with river systems, and they all have a bar. And these bars can be quite treacherous, but we decided to go, and you can see the water breaking across the entrance to the bar in Lake's entrance. And we followed a fishing boat out through here. And the fishing boat went through the bar, and he radioed back, and he said to us, it's be careful here, indicating that it was a little bit of danger. And I thought to myself at the time, well, we're certainly going to be careful. Anyhow, we came up through this to this bar, and ahead of us there was a wave, a breaking wave, which I estimate was about 4 to 5 meters tall. And I was confident in the boat, and we just headed into this at reduced speed. We went up the wave, through the breaker, and down the other side. Not a problem. The boat, it's a beautiful sea boat, so that was okay. We're very happy about that. So we got underway on the 30th of July. There was the wind, he said, there were 3 to 5 meter swells. That's the picture of the swells, 3 to 5 meter swells from the southwest. So that was on our port quarter. Not a lot of wind, but we had this swell on our port quarter. And that was what we ran into for the next 24 hours. And this gives you a bit of an idea what it was like. And then, so we headed along the Victorian coast for 3 or 4 hours. Then we turned south to head across Bass Strait and nightfall at sea. Now, when you're at sea in a boat, it's all dark, completely dark. You can't see the waves, but what you can see, if you look at the sky, you you see stars disappearing, which means that there's a big wave heading your way. So we motored through that, and the following morning we found ourselves. We had to during the crossing. We had radar on board, and we were able to see big ships crossing our bow, and were able to alter course to go behind them. So that was one real benefit of having good navigational equipment, which I fitted to the boat when I bought her. A chart plotter, you can see it here. So this was sort of rolling down the east of Flinders Island, so a bit more sort of roly-poly stuff. So the end of the first night, we were at the tip of Flinders Island, which is the northeast coast of Tasmania, and at the far end of Bass Strait, and very nasty conditions there because waves come from all directions. We continued on, and by the following morning, we made landfall off the Tasmanian coast. You can't actually get a feeling for the height of the waves on the video, but you can see how the boat was rocking from side to side. So the next thing that happened was that we were halfway down Tasmania, and we were entering what was called the Shooten Passage, and that was at the beginning of the second day. And so this is what it looked like. That was the passage there. And from that stage on, we had sheltered water. However, at this time, we thought to have a look at the primary filters. We were too busy sort of sailing the boat and, well, not sailing, motoring the boat to bother looking at the filters. And this is what the starboard filter looked like after 36 hours. So it wouldn't have been much longer before we had the same problem of the muck getting into the engines. But simply by moving that lever down and moving the other one up, we were able to change it from a dirty filter to a clean filter and just continue on our way. So passing through Shooten Passage, we were pretty much in sheltered water. We had Tasmania to the right of us. We passed down inside a place called Maria Island, and we got through what are known as the Narrows, an entrance to a shortcut across the bottom of Tasmania. So we made it through the Narrows and tied up at Dunalley Jetty. You can check these places. We had a little bit of trouble getting through the Narrows because we thought we knew where the channel was, but it had moved, and so we ran aground a couple of times, but it was sandy, and so we managed to get through okay. We actually, from Lakes Entrance to Marion Narrows, was 336 nautical miles in 48 hours, just on 48 hours, at a 7-knot average. We're quite pleased about that. So the following morning, we go through the canal. I'll just show you a little bit of this. This is going through a canal, swing bridge. We were following another boat, which made life rather simple. Safely through the canal. And then we are entering the River Derwent, which is the river, the harbour for Hobart is the River Derwent, and that is a very well-known landmark called the Iron Pot. We rounded that at about midday, and we continued up the harbour, and before our advertised arrival time, which was 2 p.m, the end was in sight. That's Hobart from the bow of the John B2. There's the life raft, which we didn't have to use, the pennant from the Royal Yacht Club. There's a casino. There's our mountain, Mount Wellington, Kunani, and this is where we're heading, to the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania. And the end of the 6-month saga, we were safe and sound at the Royal Club of Tasmania Marina on Friday the 2nd of August. And this is the quote I said at the beginning: it always seems impossible until it's done. Well, that's my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Peter. Yep, we do have some questions already in our Q&A section side. Yep, we do have one from, let me see here. Okay, that's one from Michael Bernard. He actually asked what causes diesel bugs to form in the fuel tank.
Oh, it's I'm not a chemist,
Mm-hmm,
but what I understand is that um, you have the hydrocarbon, which is the diesel. You have the water,
mm-hmm,
um, and of course, it's underneath it's underneath the it's it's anaerobic,
mm-hmm,
because in the layer between the water in the fuel tanks always have water because you get
mm-hmm,
condensation, and that goes into the
mm-hmm,
bottom of the tank. And so there's this quite specialized bug which apparently grows in that interface. Um, there are lots of things you can do about it. I mean, there are um, chemicals that you can put into your fuel tank, which uh, kill the bug, but that's not a really uh, adequate solution because the dead bugs cause that sludge. And so the more chemicals you put into the tank, the more sludge you're going to get.
All right, hope that answers your question, Michael. So we have a second question from Dominic. Goncalves here. He mentioned that he's heading on to Tassie on Spirit.
Oh, right, right.
Okay, and yep,
Okay.
yep.
Um,
And then he's asking about what is the running cost of the boat, mentioning fuel, berthing cost, maintenance, etc.
yes,
And how do you go with it? Comms, nav
yes. Well,
controls, two-way radio. He's actually asking for the cost.
yeah. Well, the
Good
cost.
question, Dominic.
Well, that's the fuel cost. Um, these engines are very economical. They use 7 litres an hour at the normal speed. So that's 15 litres for every hour's motoring. And in an hour, I can cover 7 nautical miles. Um, so question is, what is running cost of the boat? That's okay. Fuel is as I said, about 15 litres an hour, which is about $30, 30 Australian dollars an hour running.
Mhm,
Um, um, okay. Well, you asked a lot of questions there. Um,
mhm,
Berthing costs in Hobart, I think it's about six or $700 a year. Um, Maintenance, somebody said, and I think it's probably about right, um, you can budget about 20% of the purchase price of your boat per
mhm,
year in maintenance. So if you buy a boat for $100,000, you would expect to have to pay $20,000 a year in maintenance. Somebody described, boats as a hole in the water you pour money into, and that's about right. Um, Communications, yes, I spent um, quite a bit of money buying the latest comms, chart plotter, Raymarine chart plotter, Raymarine radar, um, HF radio. Um, so that's absolutely necessary if you're going to go offshore.
mhm. All right. So yeah, we have a follow-up question with Dominic from Dominic. So how do you plan your trip from point to point?
Oh, look,
Yep.
the by far the best way nowadays
Mm-hmm.
is to go to Windy. Windy has a capacity to it's got a trip planner, and what you can do if you know when you're leaving, you can actually put points on the map on the
Mm-hmm.
chart, and it'll give you and you select what speed you're going to be doing, and that will give you a forecast of how long it's going to take, what the wind is going to be at every point in the voyage, and that's
Mm-hmm.
very handy. Because if you as we had, the voyage took about 2.5 days or 3 days really,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to be in the middle of Bass Strait when a front comes through. Um, it's dangerous. It's and particularly with a motorboat, if you have a problem with one engine, well, you've got another one to fall back on. If you've got a problem with two engines, that's it. You're just sitting there. So yeah, it's a little bit challenging to pick the right weather and make sure the boat is adequate for the task.
And yeah, I have one question here as well. And how many boats have you made, Dr. Peter?
Oh, I've only made one boat, but I'm in the process of remaking John B2 because practically everything in the yacht, it was built in 1985. So even now, I've been back. This is middle of November. I've been back since 1st of August. I've had a problem with one of the gearboxes. I've had to replace that. I've checked out the. I mean, what happens with a boat? It's in a hostile environment. Seawater and air, everything rusts.
Yeah.
Maintenance is extremely important, and things have to be replaced. There's no way around it. I mean, it's the same in a yacht. I mean, you have to replace sails.
Right. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. Hope that answers your question. Okay. And then, yep. Any other questions?
Oh,
Okay.
the motorbike. Just to go back to Dominic. Yeah, look, with your motorbikes, BMW sounds pretty great. My son's got a BMW, 1100cc, so he'd relate to that. And I know the charity ride. If you're on your way down to Huon, down to Cockle Creek and where I am in Dover, you can possibly call in and we can talk about boats.
All right, Dominic, hear that?
You
Anyway.
can find me.
Anyway, thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Peter. So, yeah, for those of you who are asking what courses covers this topic, so basically, as you can see on your screens, we do have the Graduate Diploma of Engineering in Mechanical, Graduate Certificate in Mechanical Engineering. So we also have the Online Bachelor's in Mechanical Engineering, Online Masters of Engineering in Mechanical, of course, Professional Certificate in Dual Fuel Engines, and Professional Certificate of Competency in Onshore and Offshore Pipeline Systems. Okay, so yep, for the upcoming webinars, upcoming courses. So as you can see on your screens, we have for the January, we have 5 courses coming up. So that would be six. That would be on the 6th, 14th, and 21. We also have February. Okay, and then yep. For those of you who are asking about how to claim their certificate, here's it. So just to receive your certificate, kindly um, check on the link. I'll be posting the link here on the chat box as well, or you can scan the QR code in your screens, and then it will actually lead you to a survey form, which will actually once completed, it will actually provide you the certificate of attendance for today. Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Peter, and of course for sharing that one. I've never been into both really, so it's nice to hear from that, and of course the challenges during the time. So yep, it's good. Thank you so much, and again, for everyone who have attended today, you'll be able to receive your certificate after 4 business days, and then yep, I think that concludes our day. Dr. Peter, any last words before we?
No, thank you for all those who attended. I hope you find it interesting. Thank you, Marvin, for monitoring and running the show. And yeah, I look forward to more interesting times and useful times with EIT on the board. It's a very worthwhile
Yep.
and organisation. So well done, EIT.
And see you on our future webinars as well. For those attendees, see you
Okay.
on our future webinars as well. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good one. See ya. Bye bye.